All right, welcome back, focused learners and grade 8 students. Today we're breaking down an absolutely massive turning point in world history. We're going to look at the exact events that brought European powers all the way across the globe and straight into Asia. So let's dive right into this explainer.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're covering 1. The ancient trade routes, 2. The middlemen and the blockade, 3. European objectives in Asia, 4. The arrival of the Portuguese, and finally, 5. The Dutch taking control.
Okay, starting right off with Section 1, the ancient trade routes.
So you might be thinking these trade relationships just popped out of nowhere in the 15th century, right? Well, actually, scratch that. They existed way back during the Greco-Roman civilization. And thanks to the conquests of Alexander the Great, who literally marched his armies all the way to India and the vast reach of the Roman Empire, these global connections were already flourishing for centuries.
I mean, just look at the incredible goods that were already flowing out of Asia and into Europe. It's a pretty fascinating list. From China, you had these high-end luxury items like silk, perfumes, and ceramic ware. Japan was bringing silver to the table. Sri Lanka was totally famous for its pearls, gems, elephants, and ivory. India was sending out massive amounts of pepper, cinnamon, opium, and cotton clothes. And those East Indian islands, they were an absolute goldmine for spices like clove, cardamom, and nutmeg.
Now, here is the crazy part. Why were Europeans so desperate for these specific Asian commodities? Believe it or not, it was simply to flavor their food. I know it sounds kind of basic, but European diets back then were incredibly bland, and they really struggled with preserving meat. So these spices weren't just a fun luxury, they were an absolute everyday necessity just to make their meals tasty and edible.
All right, let's move on to Section 2, the middlemen and the blockade.
For the longest time, Europeans weren't actually sailing to Asia themselves. Instead, Muslim middlemen completely controlled this entire network. We're talking about traders originating from Arab countries, Persia, and Misra, which is modern-day Egypt. These guys would travel by sailing vessels, gather up all those amazing Asian commodities, and transport them back to Europe. They acted as this crucial bridge between the producers and the buyers, and obviously, they were making massive profits doing it.
For years, this setup was smooth sailing and highly profitable. But then, boom, everything changed. Turkey conquered the city of Constantinople. Literally overnight, the traditional European trade routes were completely blocked off. It was a massive shockwave that basically shut down the entire system.
Which brings us right to Section 3, European objectives in Asia.
Suddenly cut off from their precious spices, the Europeans were panicking. They didn't just want a new path. They actually had 3 very specific, ambitious goals. Number 1, buy the spices directly to generate those massive profits for themselves in Europe. Number 2, completely take over that trade monopoly previously held by the Muslims. And number 3, spread their religion in the Asian countries they encountered.
You can really see those dual economic and religious goals perfectly summed up in a famous quote by the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama. When asked why he made the journey, he simply said, "We have come here in search of Christians and spices." It really hits the nail on the head, right? They were driven equally by the hunt for spices and the zeal to spread their faith.
Let's see how that played out in Section 4, Arrival of the Portuguese.
With those intense motivations driving everyone, a literal global race kicked off. And the winner? Portugal. In 1498, Vasco da Gama successfully reached Calicut, India. When he got back to his king carrying immense wealth from just this single trip, the Portuguese crown immediately realized the unbelievable profits that were waiting for them.
But here's the thing. You can't exactly manage a global trade empire from thousands of miles away in Europe. You need a home base. So the Portuguese captured the city of Goa in India and made it their eastern headquarters. From there, they started building strategic relationships with regional powers, like the Kati Kingdom over in Lanka. They were totally laying the groundwork for absolute dominance.
But they wouldn't be the only players for long. Section 5, the Dutch take control.
That Portuguese monopoly was pretty quickly challenged by a fierce new arrival, the Dutch. Instead of just focusing on India, the Dutch aggressively targeted the real prize, the Southeast Asian spice islands themselves. They systematically set up warehouses all along the Indian coast, forcefully drove the Portuguese out of power, and entrenched their own powerful headquarters over in Batavia.
It's wild to see how rapidly global power shifted. It starts in 1498 with Vasco da Gama's breakthrough arrival in India. Just a few years later, the Portuguese lock it down by capturing Goa. But fast forward to the mid-17th century, and the Dutch have already ousted them, and totally succeeded in gaining trade dominance in the East.
So we've seen some incredibly powerful objectives driving this whole era, right? A total desperation for spices, a ruthless drive for monopolies, and the push to spread religion. And we just watched the dramatic shifts in global power, moving from the Arab middlemen to the Portuguese and finally landing with the aggressive dominance of the Dutch.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a pivotal question to think about. How did the arrival of these early European explorers permanently change the history of Asia? Think about that before your next history lesson. Thank you so much for joining me today. Don't forget to hit subscribe for more structured textbook breakdowns, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.